Okay, so I'm here with Sergeant Buzfuz, who has
3/5 of.
a new album coming out soon, which is, I mean, would you describe it as a concept album?
I suppose it is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, concept albums have a bad name, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Well,
It's,
depends what the concept is, and this is a great concept. This is basically a history of the people. From what years?
from St. Peter, the first one, although they weren't called popes then, up to the early 1400s, up to what's called the Great Schism, when there were 3 popes. So the album finishes with 3 popes. And then the next album, when that eventually is done, in about 8 years, we'll start off with the 3 popes and we'll see what happens next.
So how long have you been working on this idea?
The very first Pope song I wrote, I remember I was playing it on a short tour I did in 2004. So I think I wrote it in 2004, the first song. So that was 8 years ago.
And what made you set out on this crazy plan of doing a history of the popes?
Well, I suppose I was brought up as a Catholic. So yeah. I was brought up as a Catholic, so therefore there's an interest there. I'd always figured I'd like to one day read about the history of all popes. So I got a book and started reading up about it. And when I read this book, I was thinking to myself, oh, this would be good to make a short kind of 5-minute song of the whole history of the popes. You know, like those Shakespeare in half an hour kind of things. Or like Jeff Lewis, some of his histories of things like the Communist Revolution or the history of New York New York punk and stuff. So I thought I might try doing a history of 2,000 years in 5 minutes. But then I couldn't squash it into 5 minutes. It's more going to be like 5 albums, I think.
Yeah, the second half of the album is kind of very different from the first half. The first half is of the songs about the popes. How did was that always the plan to have the second half of the album as something quite different, or did that just happen in the studio?
Yeah, I mean the thing is, you know, when I wrote the first song, it's a bit of a dirge. The first song, it's a kind of 4-chord folky song.
Yeah, I love it.
Thanks. When I wrote that, it never occurred to me that might be the first track on an album, because I wouldn't normally choose to write a 7-minute dirge as the first track on an album.
It was the last track on the June.
It was the last track on the last track on the previous album. So to me, it's more like a last track on the first. And then I wrote a few more, and then I had, I don't know, about 5 tracks, and the music was this, and this. And then I thought, I just like the idea of doing an album where we do something a bit more experimental.
Holy Trinity, some instruments and instrumentation you don't usually hear on a Buzfuz. Really kind of enjoying that.
To have a different approach of writing and to include the others in the writing. Other than that, it's just whatever came out of the improvisations. And you know, some of those sounds are on this album that haven't been on previous Buzfuz albums, but that doesn't mean that we all don't, you know, we haven't all been listening to those kind of sounds for years. They've just never kind of come out in the music before, because I tend to sit down and write a song with a guitar, and it usually comes out quite poppy. But you know, I'm a big fan of lots of other stuff, and I think that's come out a bit more in the second half of the album.
The tales, is that old cliche that if you kind of wrote it in a story, in a fiction tale, that people would think you were making it up, but the one which sticks out is Pope Famosus, and
been dug up.
Tell us a little bit about what you know about him.
Well, he was a pope who, after he died, a subsequent pope dug him up and dug up his rotting corpse and tied it to a chair, and they had some kind of mock corpse ceremony to prove that he was guilty of various misdemeanours. And he was found guilty, and I think then, if I remember correctly, the corpse was then tied to the back of a horse and ridden through the streets of Rome, dangling off the horse and bumping on the stones and everything. And then he was buried again, and then years later someone else dug him up again and tried him again.
Unlucky Pope.
Yeah. So I mean.
Yeah, no rest for the wicked.
One of the most common questions I get asked by people at gigs is like, oh, is that all true? Yeah, of course it's all true. I wouldn't make it up. You know? I mean,
Don't you have to make it up?
You wouldn't come up like with stories like that, would you?
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned the famous story about Pope Joan. For a while, it was kind of maybe she did exist, and then the Catholic Church said actually she didn't exist. What's the current word?
The current word is people don't really know. There's no actual proof that there was a female pope. There's no proof at all. But it was thought for several hundred years that there had been back in the Dark Ages when records weren't that great. And the point I'm making there isn't the fact that whether there was or whether there wasn't. The point I'm making is that the Church decided that no way could there be a female pope, so any images of Pope Joan were then taken down and hidden. You know, that's the point I'm making. Possibly she existed, probably she didn't. But it's still an interesting angle.
Absolutely, yeah. And another thing which keeps cropping up, I mean, in the songs is the issue of how the Catholic Church has dealt with sex. They seem to change the rules, allow some things that really shouldn't be allowed, and then other times banning things that should be allowed.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And I guess you could say it kind of, even to this day, you know, with the
yeah, it's been a big thing for the Church for most of its 2,000 years, I think.
And
I mean, it's a patriarchal, monotheistic religion, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is part of the problem of it.
Yeah. And there's so many tales of corruption and you know, serious crimes of actual popes. I mean, did that surprise you when you were researching it, that there's just so much kind of criminality going on?
It doesn't surprise me that went on, but it surprised me just the extent, the never-ending extent of it. It's like there weren't actually that many popes who didn't behave despicably, disgracefully. Just the amount of stuff, and also some things some of them did. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I think there was one act, kind of anti-folk-ish act in America who fell foul of the Catholic Church. It was actually some proclamation by the Catholic Church that you shouldn't listen to this person's music. I think it'd be quite ironic, and it could conceivably happen that you know, the Catholic Church, you know, bans the Buzfuz album, even though it's their history, because it's so sordid, really, the past of it.
They couldn't even be proud of that original stuff.
You're looking for excommunication.
I mean, how can they ban it?
Well, not ban it, but you know, they sometimes
Ban it from
issue
convents.
they sometimes issue, you know, kind of personal edicts about how you shouldn't watch a particular film, or
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
this film is
yeah.
you know.
Well, that would be
They may well do.
They'd have lists of
Yes,
novels
that's right.
through history
Yeah.
you're not supposed to read.
Two things. First of all, there's dozens of books where this is all documented in books.
Yes.
I'm just putting it into song. It's all there in books, so I'm not presenting anything that hasn't been presented before. I'm just presenting it in a new way,
in a catchy way.
maybe in a catchy way, and maybe in a way that might draw a new audience rather than scholars who read history books. And secondly, that's kind of why I don't want to make a big thing of this, but I've kind of put part one of the index, because that's kind of my idea that of calling the whole series the index, which kind of links to the index of forbidden books. That just like at the moment we've got these SOPA laws coming up into the internet, it's all the same thing. It's about banning the truth. So I mean, a lot of this story as well, all the skullduggery that goes on is exactly the same as what's happening now in the world. So, you know, you look in all the continents of the world and there's abuse of power. Yeah, the stuff in this album is all before the printing press. So they could do what the hell they liked. There wasn't the Sun to write about it the next day, you know.
And if you complain, they could hang
Oh,
you off,
yes,
walk
yeah,
you,
yeah.
Hack
cut your
their
tongue
phones.
out.
Their bonuses and stuff would have been questioned.
Yeah.
Maybe let's speak a little bit more about the music and the influences on the album. How would you describe the music on this album? You know, what kind of
Ask them. change.
What kind of music's on this album? How would you describe it as?
Well, the improv stuff is a mixture, I suppose, with kind of space rock. Some of it's a little bit like Hawkwind, track is a bit like The Fall. I don't know, there's Velvet's influences there.
About the second part of the album and the improvisational sections. How did that work in the studio? What was the process?
There's no real plan at all. It was just play, and Joe used pictures as pointers and
What kind of pictures?
Oh, I can't remember. I think one was of the sea.
Desert Island.
Yeah.
Jellyfish.
Jellyfish. That was a particularly interesting one.
David Cameron.
Oh, there was, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really angry one.
Yeah, I was going to say. So what's next in the Pope's project? Is there any new songs coming out, or are you just going to let this album come out and have a break for a while?
Well, the next thing is to play some gigs. After that, we've already kind of got the next album written of non-Pope songs, so that'll be next, and that'll give me some time to write a bunch of lyrics for the next one. But in August, do you know I'm playing at the Edinburgh Festival?
No.
Yeah, I'm doing a one-man show at the Edinburgh Festival, 16 nights. In August, where I'm presenting Go to the Devil and Shake Yourself as a one-man show.
You should go up.
Piano and guitar, come up, yeah, it's great. It's brilliant, it's really good.
Can I ask something?
Yeah,
sure.
go
I
on.
was saying, is it deliberate, the release date? Is that a deliberate date for any reason?
Good question.
Almost. I think if it wasn't Easter, we would have released it a week or two later.
But that wouldn't
Because Sheepy's got his single out on the 2nd. And we would have. He's someone else on the label.
So sad.
He's a guy
not
from
one of those things
Liverpool
you
on
take
the
to
label. He's great. But we would have gone a few weeks after that. But I couldn't miss out releasing it on Easter Monday. Or
Perfect.
I think we're going to tell some people it's on Easter Sunday. Actually, how is it going to be received in Dublin?
Well, I played the first track for my mother and my uncle when we were all fairly pissed at about 2:30 in the morning, and they're usually incredibly vocal people, and they went incredibly quiet. It's a long track, obviously the first one. And I was kind of interjecting with trying to get some conversation. Nothing was happening, and then my uncle said at the end of it, "Yeah, there was time to turn in for this." That was it. And he's not a prude at all, proper socialist and that, but he just didn't want to face that with my mother there as well, I don't think,